I am Morgan from the Indian Trails Public Library's Launchpad. And that's the space that we have all of the cool techie stuff, and we do a lot of craft stuff as well. With us this evening, we've got Christina Uzzo from the Citizens Utility Board, and I will go ahead and hand it off to you. So welcome, Christina.
Great, thank you so much. My name is Christina Uzzo, and I work for the Citizens Utility Board, or CUB, and I believe this is being recorded, so you'll be able to access it later. We also have another recorded version on CUB's YouTube page, and I'll also be sending Morgan all of the resources that I mentioned in this presentation so that you're able to access them after the presentation, and then feel free to contact me if you have any more questions. But tonight we'll mostly be talking about what it would look like to put solar panels on your home and how to take advantage of state and federal incentives to make that significantly more affordable. But we'll also briefly talk about a new program called Community Solar, where you can subscribe to solar that is built somewhere else. So I'll go and give a little bit of background on CUB for those of you who aren't familiar with us. We are a nonprofit consumer advocacy organization. We were founded in 1984 to fight on behalf of Illinois utility ratepayers to try to make sure that electricity and natural gas is as affordable as possible. We also have a hotline where you can call us if you ever have any issues or concerns with the utility company. You know, if you're facing disconnection, or if you just have something that's unresolved with the utility company and you're not satisfied with the answers they're giving you, you can call us and we can escalate that complaint within the utilities department. And we've been able to get a lot of things resolved that way that consumers were not able to resolve by themselves, because sometimes it's really difficult to navigate all these different complicated programs and utility companies and things like that. We also have a lot of really great resources on our website. I believe we have about 60 different fact sheets on our website. So if there's really anything utility or clean energy related, if you have questions about it, we probably have a fact sheet on it on our website. So it's a great place to go. Since we were founded, we've saved consumers more than $20 billion by fighting proposed electricity, natural gas, and telephone rate hikes. And then we also can do a lot of direct consumer education, like these webinars. We also have a program where you can send in your utility bills and have them reviewed by one of our staffers, and they'll make sure that everything looks good, that you're not being overcharged by an alternate supplier, and also recommend energy efficiency programs based on your usage. We used to do those in person, so that's what this is a photo of. You know, you would sit down, look at your bills in person, but we've moved to doing that either by phone or by Zoom or by email, really whatever works best for you. Just get in touch with us and we can help do a checkup, make sure everything looks good. So here is the agenda for tonight. We'll start with the benefits of going solar. Then we'll talk about the basics of going solar, including what it looks like on your house. Then we'll talk about the incentives available for going solar, both state and federal. Then we'll talk about your options. We'll talk about the difference between leasing and owning solar panels. Then we'll talk about two new programs available in Illinois, Solar for All and Community Solar. These are a little different than just putting panels on your roof, but they're two great new programs as well. So we'll dive right in. And if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. And Morgan, if you see a question come through the chat, you're welcome to just interrupt me and ask it if it's related to the slide that I'm on. If it's not, then we can hold that and answer those at the end.
Definitely. Sounds good.
So one of the main benefits of going solar right now is that it's really the right time to go solar. Currently in the US, we have 77.7 gigawatts of total installed solar capacity. That's enough to power 14.5 million American homes. And of those 77 gigawatts, 17 of them were installed last year in 2019 alone. So 2019 was a huge year for solar installations in the US. Last year, solar accounted for 40% of all new electric generating capacity added to the grid. That was more than any other energy source, and it was also the largest share that solar had ever made up. So, you know, we're getting to a point where there's a lot of new solar being added to the grid. There's a lot of solar panels being produced, and there's a lot of solar companies. which has added more competition to the market. And just the fact that more panels are being produced has also driven the price down. So the price has come down significantly over the last 5-10 years. Sometimes I talk to people who got a solar quote 5 years ago and they say it wasn't affordable. And I always tell them to get a new quote now because so much has changed even just in the last 5 years alone. Another benefit of going solar is that it's been shown to increase the resale value of your home. Zillow found that homes with solar tend to sell for about 4% more than homes that don't have solar, that are similar. And then going solar pays for itself. If you choose to purchase a system, the typical payback time is within about 7 to 10 years in Illinois. And then the systems are warranted to last for 25 years. So you get, at least 15 to 20 years where you've paid off your system and you're still saving a significant amount of money on your electricity bill every month. There's also the environmental benefit of going solar. So over the course of 25 years, which is again how long the systems are warranted for, the average solar system can offset over 260,000 pounds of carbon dioxide emissions. That's equivalent to any one of these 6 things. So it's equivalent to diverting 41 tons of waste from a landfill, or it's equivalent to the CO2 emissions from burning 129,000 pounds of coal. So it's equivalent to any one of these things. So I always say pick whichever one makes you happiest, and you can think of your panels as having that much of an impact on the world. We'll get into solar basics now. One of the first questions people tend to have when we give solar presentations in Illinois is, that all sounds great, but does it actually work in Illinois? And the short answer is yes. What we're concerned with is whether or not you can get enough solar production over the course of the year to offset your annual electricity consumption. And we're able to do that in Illinois because we have a lot of sunshine during the spring and summer months, and even fall months like today. A helpful comparison is to compare Illinois to Germany. Germany has the highest installed rate of solar per capita of any country in the world. But if you look at their measure of solar resource, they're down here in these blues and purples. So they get significantly less solar output, or they get significantly less just solar energy because they're farther north than Illinois than we do here in Illinois. So best solar resource in the US is in the Southwest. That's not surprising, but in Illinois, we're still in these, dark yellows, light greens. So we still get a really good amount of solar over the course of the year, which is what we're concerned with. Here we have a simple diagram of how the panels will work on your home. So it all starts in the panels. Obviously, the solar panels are made out of a naturally light sensitive material. And so when the photons from the sun, or when that sunlight hits the solar panels, that the material in the panels will respond by absorbing that energy, which excites the electrons, and that creates a flow of electric current within the panel. That electricity is then sent to an inverter. Solar panels produce direct current power, but we use alternating current power in our homes and on the grid. So before anything else can be done with that electricity, it has to be converted on site to alternating current. And that all happens at the inverter. Then the power will flow to your home, and it will power anything that's currently drawing power. So if you have the TV on, if you have the AC on, the electricity will first go to power that. And then if there's any excess, it will flow back to the grid, and it will be read by your utility meter on its way out. So your utility meter will keep track of how much excess solar energy you're sending back to the grid. Most inverters offer what's known as module level monitoring. Basically, that means that they give you this dashboard where you can see how much solar energy each panel is producing in real time, or over the course of the day, over the course of the past week. They have different views that you can toggle between. But this is really important because if there's an issue with one of your panels, it'll tell you right there that it's not producing as much, and you'll be able to pinpoint where the issue is and then work to get it resolved. There's been some development in terms of the type of in terms of the type of inverters that we use. So the first type of inverter that was available was called a string inverter. And with a string inverter, you had all the panels connected end to end. And so any power that was produced in the first panel had to flow through each of the subsequent panels before it would go to the inverter. And this is not the best way to do it for residential systems anymore, because most residential systems will have some amount of shading at some point during the year. You know, it could just be from a electrical line, or part of a branch or something. So even just a little bit of shading doesn't work well with this type of inverter, because it basically brings the entire system down to the output of the panel that's producing the least. So it brings it down to the output of the weakest link, basically, at any given time. And that just doesn't work very well for residential settings where we have shade at certain times of the year. So to deal with that, we have now two types of inverters that are commonly available in residential applications. The first type is known as microinverters. This is where the inverter has actually been sized down and installed on each panel. So each panel has its own little inverter, and all of the electricity from this panel is converted before it's sent to the house. And so each one is able to produce at its maximum capacity, and they're not interfering with each other. Then there's also this other option, which is known as power optimizers. With power optimizers, you still have one central inverter, but you have a little power optimizer that's embedded in each panel that basically keeps the wattage output of each panel consistent, so that when the power flows through the whole system, they're not interfering with each other. And again, each panel is able to produce at its maximum output. So if you go to get solar quotes, one company might give you a quote for this setup, and one company might give you a quote for this setup, and you'll just have to talk to them to figure out which option is best for you, and how much shading you have, or how many different panel orientations you have might impact which one is better. But it's really going to depend on the specifics of your household. I believe most solar companies would be able to offer both options. So they're both really common at this point, and they're both going to capture all of the energy that your panels are producing. In terms of where we want to put solar panels, the best exposure is south facing, and you can also put them on east or west facing roofs, but you need to install about 20% more panels to get the same output as you would on a south facing roof. You can look at this tool called Google Project Sunroof to get an idea of where on your roof would be best to put panels. So you can put in your address, and it'll show you something like this, and it'll show you where on your house is best for putting solar. And so the sides of the roof that are lit up yellow are going to be the sides that get the best solar exposure. Sometimes this Google Project Sunroof data is outdated. If if you cut down a tree, if they took this photo a while ago, they might not know that. So take whatever estimate they give you with a grain of salt. It's more just a way to start getting an idea of where on your roof might be good for panels. But the most accurate estimate of the cost and of what kind of system you need is going to come from a solar installer who's looking at your roof and who is looking at your current electricity usage. In terms of how we put the panels on the house, most residential systems are mounted on the roof, but you can also do ground mounted as well if you have enough space in your backyard and you want to not have them on the roof. If they are mounted on the roof, they're going to be attached to an aluminum racking system that's underneath the panels, and then that will be attached into the rafters of your roof. All of this equipment is weather rated, so it will not cause your roof to leak, and it's also storm rated as well. So a question people often have is, what happens when it snows? And if your panels are covered with snow for a couple hours or for a whole day, that will reduce or completely shut off the power being produced by the panels. But snow doesn't tend to stick to the panels for very long. Partially that's because they're installed at an angle. They're installed to match the angle of your roof, and so that means it'll slide off. They're also much slicker than your actual roof itself, because they're a smooth material, so that will cause the snow to slide off faster. And then once they start producing any electricity at all, so even if they're just producing a little bit of electricity, they start to heat up, and that heat melts the panels off, or sorry, melts the snow off. So typically, you know, if your roof is covered in snow, the solar panels will actually be the first thing to clear off. And another reason that it's not a big issue is because even if it's covered with snow for a couple days, those months where it's snowing are not the months where we have the most solar output anyway. So you're not missing like super lucrative solar production days. So you don't need to, it's not an issue to the point where you need to, you know, not consider going solar because of the snow. And then in terms of roof condition, you're going to want to make sure that you're not putting panels on a roof that needs to be replaced really soon, because that adds an added cost to the re-roof, because you have to have the solar company come back out, uninstall the panels, and then reinstall them after the roofers finish their work. So that you'll have to just know when your roof needs to be replaced and talk to a solar installer about whether or not it makes sense to replace the roof before or after going solar. And then finally, one final consideration is sometimes if there are squirrels in your area, and if you know that there's squirrels that get up on your roof, sometimes they'll get up underneath the panels because it's warm down there, or because it's just protected. And that can cause a problem if they build a nest under there, because they sometimes like to chew on the wires for the panels, and that can take out some of your panels. So what you can do to avoid that is install something called a critter guard, which is basically just like a black skirt that's going to block this little gap between the panels and your roof. So I'd recommend, if you're concerned about that, mentioning that to a solar installer. When you install solar in a residential area, they're almost always going to be grid-tied systems or grid-direct systems. That means that you're still connected to the utilities grid, and you're not just becoming like a self-sustaining island. That also means that when the utility is shut off, when there's a power outage, your solar panels will also be shut off. That's for safety reasons. You don't want to have a situation where your solar panels are producing electricity and sending electricity to the grid, but the power is out, and that could cause a safety concern for any linesmen that come out to work on the power lines, or just anyone else in the area. So during an outage, your panels will also be shut off. But there's a lot of benefits of being connected to the grid, and we'll get into that on the next couple slides. Just to give you an idea of what the average residential solar installation looks like in Illinois, the average size is 6.5 kilowatts. And that's estimated to produce 9,000 kilowatt hours in the first year. So kilowatt, or kW, is a measure of power, and your system size will be measured in kilowatts. So things that will affect the number of kilowatts of your system are how many panels you get and what type of panels you get, because different panels are different sizes and they have different power output ratings. Then kilowatt hour, or kWh, is a measure of electricity generated or used. And when the sun is shining, your system will produce kilowatt hours of solar energy. But this will vary from day to day based off of the season and how long the day is, and how cloudy it is in the weather and things like that. But you'll see these acronyms, kW and kilowatt hour, pop up on your solar quotes or throughout the rest of this presentation. So I wanted to explain the difference. The kilowatt of your system, that's not going to change. That's a fixed aspect of your system. And then the kilowatt hours will change as the conditions change. We say that this size system is estimated to produce 9,000 kilowatt hours in the first year, because solar panels naturally degrade a little bit in their output over time, but they're usually warranted to only degrade by 0.5% each year. So even though it's going down a little bit, by the end of your 25-year warranty, they'll still be producing at 80 or 85% of what they were producing in the first year. So it's not a significant degradation by any means. So a really important program to understand before you go solar is net metering. This is the program where you get credited for the extra energy that you're sending back to the grid. And so this is one of the main benefits of having your system be connected to the grid. So basically, any time that your system is producing more energy than you're using, that excess energy will be sent back to the grid and you'll be credited for it on your utility bill. And for ComEd customers, there's a state law that says that ComEd has to credit you for that electricity at the same rate that you're buying electricity. So 1 kilowatt hour sent back to the grid is going to offset 1 kilowatt hour that you use from the grid. That's called one-to-one net metering, and it's the best kind of net metering policy to have because it's going to save you the most money on your utility bills. This graph illustrates why having a strong net metering policy is really important. Here we have the hours of the day. This is midnight to 11 p.m. These blue bars are showing typical household electricity consumption. There'll be a small peak in the morning as people get up and start getting ready. And then it will typically dip down during the middle of the day. And then there'll be an even bigger peak in the evening as people, cook dinner and watch TV and use their computers and things like that. And that does not match up very well with the peak solar production, which usually peaks between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. So it's really important to be able to get credited for this extra energy that you're sending back to the grid in order to see the full financial benefit of going solar. I wanted to point out that, this graph of typical household energy usage looks really different right now if you have kids that are doing remote learning and if you are working from home, because you're not leaving at 8 a.m. and turning all the lights off and turning your computers off and things like that. There's still a lot of activity happening in the house. So you would not see this leveling off happening throughout the day. But during more normal times, this is what typical household energy usage looks like. A couple other things to note about net metering is that it will never completely zero out your bill or eliminate it. So if you see marketing or if you hear a company say, never pay a ComEd bill again, that's false, and they are legally not allowed to say that, but sometimes they still do, which is very frustrating. That's because of a couple fixed charges on your bill that are not offset by net metering, and I'll show you those on the next slide. With net metering, your credits can roll over from month to month. So if you produce more energy than you need total over the course of a summer month, those extra credits will roll forward to the future months, and they will help offset your bills going forward. So basically the way that it works is that most solar installers will size your system to offset 100% of what you need over the course of the year. And so they're basically building it to overproduce in the spring and summer so that it keeps your bills low even in the fall and winter. And then excess credits will expire in April. So if you have any extra credits in April, they will be zeroed out and you won't receive credit for those. But April is the best month for them to expire because it gives you a chance to use up all of your summer credits during all the winter months where we're producing less solar energy. And then it resets right before we head into the next spring and summer. A note for ComEd customers is that ComEd has a rule that says that you can only install a system that's sized to produce up to 110% of what you used over the previous year. So you can't just install, twice as much solar as what you need. They have this cap where you can only install 10% extra, but ultimately that's a good thing because if you installed twice as much as what you needed, you would just end up losing a lot of credits in April, and it wouldn't be a good financial decision to do it that way. Here you can see some of those rollover credits in the months where the yellow bar is higher than the blue bar. These are months where there's excess solar being produced, and so these credits will roll forward and help reduce these bills as well. Typically, you'd see even more rollover than this. This is a system that's only offsetting 73% of the household's energy usage, but typically you would see a system that's even bigger, and so you'd get even more rollover. Are there any questions so far? That's kind of that's one of the more nitty-gritty sections of the presentation, so just want to give people a second to type in questions if they have them. Okay, looks like we don't, so feel free to type them in and I can pause if any come in. Here we have an example of what your ComEd bill will look like with net metering on it. So this is the back of the ComEd bill under your metering information. Before you go solar, there's just going to be one line here showing how much energy you used. But after you go solar, they add a second line. And so there's two measures happening. It's measuring the kilowatt hours that you used from the grid, and then it's measuring the kilowatt hours that you sent back to the grid. So in this example, the household used 420 kilowatt hours, and they sent 600 kilowatt hours back to the grid. That leads to a rollover of 180 kilowatt hours that can help offset bills in future months. And then those 420 kilowatt hours of credits are applied to the rest of the bill. So you see these credits offsetting the supply section, the delivery section, and the taxes and fees section. There are two fixed charges under delivery that are not offset by net metering. There's a $10 customer charge and a $5 standard metering charge, which means that basically the lowest your bill will go is about $15 a month. But if you have a system that's sized to offset everything that you need, your bill will be about $15 every month. When you go solar, it's also a good idea to invest in energy efficiency. Energy efficiency investments have a higher return on investment than going solar does. So you don't want to install a bunch of solar panels on a house that's really inefficient, because you're just going to be wasting panels and installing more than you need. Some things that you can do to make your home more energy efficient are upgrade to LED lighting. You can also swap out some of your appliances for Energy Star appliances. This is mostly going to be helpful if you have some really outdated appliances, or if you have, a really old freezer in the garage or something like that. It might be worth considering swapping it out for an Energy Star appliance. You can also weatherize your home. That's anything that will make your home warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer. It can often be something as simple as recaulking around the windows, or making sure that the seals under your door are flush with the ground and things like that, to not let in a draft. It doesn't always have to be as complicated as redoing all the insulation or getting all new windows. It can often be smaller fixes that make a big difference on how efficient your house is. Then there are also programs that will reward you for shifting your electricity usage habits. All of that information will be included in the packet that I send to Morgan that she can send out tomorrow or next week. And then if you have any questions about any of those energy efficiency programs, you can ask me about them as well. So here we have a checklist of things to think about before you speak with an installer. You want to think about, does your roof have good solar exposure? You might already have a good sense of that. If you know that your neighborhood looks like this and it doesn't have very many trees, and you know that there's not shading on your roof, then you might be a really good candidate for solar. But you might not have a good sense of it. And in that case, you can look at Google Project Sunroof. You want to think about which direction does your roof face. Again, south facing is the best, but east and west are also completely viable. When do you anticipate re-roofing? And is your home energy efficient? So we'll move now into the incentives available for going solar. I'll go through these one by one on the next slides, but there's basically two incentives that you can take advantage of in Illinois. This first one is referred to as SRECs, and this is an incentive from the state of Illinois that can cover up to 35% of the cost of going solar. And that stands for Solar Renewable Energy Credit. The second credit is from the federal government, and it's a tax credit equal to 26% of the cost of going solar. These two credits you'll receive within 6 months to a year of going solar, and they can help you, pay back your initial investment or pay back part of your loan if you finance it. And then the utility net metering credits will keep your electricity bill low going forward, and they'll save you money in the long run. Another benefit that we have in Illinois is we have a law on the books that says that your Homeowners Association cannot block you from going solar. They're allowed to put certain restrictions in place, but they are not allowed to just have an outright rule that says no solar. And they are also not allowed to fine you for going solar. So we'll go into each of those credits in more detail now. The first one is the SREC, or Solar Renewable Energy Credit. The way that this credit works is that Illinois has a goal to hit 25% renewable energy by 2025. And part of how they want to hit that goal is that if you put solar panels on your house, they want to be able to count that towards their overall goal. But legally, they can't count it towards their goal unless they pay you for it. So this credit is them paying you for the solar energy you're putting on the grid so that they can count it towards their renewable energy goal. So the way that they figure out how much they owe you is your solar installer will estimate how much energy your system is supposed to generate over the first 15 years of it being installed. Once they have that number, that amount of energy, it will be multiplied by a dollar amount per unit of green energy, and that will be used to determine the SREC payment that you will receive. And this will come to you as a check in the mail about 6 months to a year after going solar. There's a lot of paperwork that goes on to access this incentive. So people can sometimes have a lot of questions about it. It's a really important incentive though, because it can cover 35 or 40% of the cost of going solar. But it is an incentive that comes with a lot of paperwork because you're basically promising that your system is going to produce the amount of energy that your solar installer says it will produce over the first 15 years of being installed. So there's paperwork that goes with that. If you have more in-depth questions about this, as you're going through the process of going solar, you can reach out to CUB and we can help walk you through it. The next credit is the federal tax credit, and that covers 26% of the cost of going solar. That includes everything. It includes all the labor costs and all the parts and everything. It does not, however, include a new roof unless you're one of the rare situations where your roof requires some structural reinforcement to support the panels. You need to own the home in order to take advantage of this credit, but it does not have to serve as your principal residence. So if you own a rental home, you could take advantage of this credit on that property as well. This credit is non-refundable, so it will just reduce the amount you owe in income taxes for the year. And if this credit is worth more than what you owe in income taxes that year, the excess can roll over to the next year. This credit is unfortunately on its way out. So it was at 30% for a long time. 2020 was the first time that it dropped to 26% of the cost of going solar. And next year it drops to 22% of the cost of going solar. And then after that, it goes away completely for residential. This is something that could be extended at the federal level, but who knows what's going to happen with that. So if you want to, make plans according to what's set in stone right now, you would want to definitely install solar by the end of next year in order to take advantage of this credit. It's November 5th right now, so it's probably too late to, compare your options and sign a contract and be installed before the end of 2020. So you're probably looking at this 22% credit value, which this is only a small drop compared to it just going away next year. So definitely, if you're thinking of going solar, do it next year. Another thing is that the state incentive is also running out, but that's not running out on there's not a set date that it runs out. It's more first come, first served. So we don't know exactly when it'll run out, but we think that it will also run out early next year. So if you're thinking of going solar, really start getting quotes now. That credit will hopefully also be extended, but that's also dependent on energy policy passing in Springfield. So if you want to take advantage of these credits, try to go solar within the next couple months. We'll talk now about your options for going solar.
Christina, it looks like we did get a question about the SREC credit application.
Perfect. Oh, yes. So the question is, does the installer get any split from the SREC credit application? Yes, sorry that I forgot to mention that. Because of all the paperwork that has to happen and the applications, all of that's either handled by the solar installer or it's handled by a third-party company that they work with. You legally cannot apply for this credit by yourself. You have to work with a company that's known as an approved vendor. And because of that, they rather than charging a fee for that, they just take a cut of the SREC, which they typically take about 10% as their SREC fee. If you see a company that wants to take more than 10%, I would maybe shop around a little bit, but 10% is standard. The next question that came in, does the CUB team have a list of installers and a table with what fees each charge. Unfortunately, we do not. There's just too many companies in Illinois for us to have a list of all residential solar installers, or for us to like go through and rate them all. But we refer people to the Illinois Solar Energy Association's list of installers, and then you can just ask them when you're talking to them what percent of the SREC they charge as a brokerage fee. But most of them will be at that 10% level. Okay, so if you want to put solar panels on your home, there's 3 ways to do that. The first is to purchase the panels outright. This is what we've been talking about for most of the night, where you'll get to take direct advantage of the state incentive and the federal incentive. The second option is to lease the system. So with a lease, the solar company will put the panels on your roof, but they will own the equipment and you will pay them monthly lease payments. The third option is a power purchase agreement, or PPA. This is similar to a lease because you don't own the system, but instead of paying a set amount per month for the lease, you're paying a rate per kilowatt hour of electricity generated. So you can think of a PPA as this equipment's been put on your roof and you're just buying the electricity that it produces. And you can think of a lease as you're renting the equipment that's been put on your roof. But they're both kind of similar. They're both similar in that you do not get to take direct advantage of the federal credit or the state credit because you don't own the system. So the solar company takes advantage of those credits on your behalf. They use those credits to reduce the cost of your payments, but there's no mechanism or requirement that they pass on a certain amount of that value to you. So you're definitely not seeing the full value of those credits. Some things to look out for is that a lot of leases and PPAs include cost escalators. That's a line in the contract that says that the amount you're paying each year will go up by 2% or 3%. That might sound small, but these are often 20-year contracts. And so even a 3% increase every year could mean that you're paying 50% more by the last year of the contract compared to the first year of the contract. So look out for that. They justify those by saying, well, the cost of electricity is going up 5% per year, which is just not true. The cost of electricity kind of goes up and down, and it might go up over the course of 20 years, but it is definitely not just consistently going up 5% per year. So don't believe them when they tell you that that's why they get to charge you 3% extra each year. You also want to check the contract for leases and PPAs to see what happens if you move. Some of them have some pretty unfavorable stuff in there for people who move before the contract is up. And just CUB recommends that you never sign a solar lease without first exploring ownership options. Solar ownership has become a lot more affordable than it was before. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't know that. And so these companies kind of, in my opinion, they kind of take advantage of the fact that people don't know that. And some of them will just lead with their leases and they'll say, look how affordable our lease is. And they won't show you the math for if you were to own it and finance it and take advantage of those credits directly. So we just recommend that you do your homework and understand what's best for you before signing a lease. Okay, the next program I want to talk about is called Community Solar. This is a new option for people who can't install solar on their own property for whatever reason. And so there's all these community solar gardens that are being built all across Illinois, and they're like these big 8 to 10 acre solar farms. All of the offers that are currently available guarantee savings on your utility bill. And so the way it works is that you'll show the community solar company a copy of your utility bill, and they'll look at how much energy you used over the past year, and they'll use that to determine your subscription size. So, if you live in like a townhome, they might subscribe you to 10 panels. And if you live in a standalone 2-story home with, detached garage that uses lots of electricity, you might be subscribed to 25 panels. So it's tailored to match how much electricity you use. And then each month your subscription will generate solar energy, and the community solar company will report the amount of energy that was generated by your panels to the utility company, to ComEd in this case. and you'll get a credit on your ComEd bill for the energy that these panels produced. So it's really similar to how you get credited for if you just put panels on your own roof. You'll now pay two bills. You'll pay your existing electric bill, which will be reduced by those community solar credits. And then you'll pay a monthly bill to the community solar company. But because these projects are so highly incentivized by the state of Illinois, the community solar companies are actually able to offer that electricity at a lower rate than ComEd can offer electricity. And so even though you're paying two bills, you're saving money overall. We have a new website, just got updated last week, called solarinthecommunity.com that compares all of these different community solar offers, and it compares the terms of them. The reason we can do this for community solar is because there's only 6 companies offering community solar in Illinois. So I was able to go through all the contracts and make the comparisons, but there's hundreds of companies that will install solar on your roof. So that's why we can do this for community solar, but we can't do it we just don't have the capacity to do that for residential solar. Here's an example of how you're saving money, even though you have a second bill. So here on the left, we have without community solar. This is what your bill looks like. You're being charged for supply, delivery, and taxes and fees. With community solar, your electric bill will have a credit on it under the supply section. So in this example, you used 800 kilowatt hours and your community solar subscription produced about 700 kilowatt hours. So you're seeing a $50 credit here under the supply section. That reduces your ComEd bill to $59. Then you'll get billed for those credits by the community solar company, but usually at either a 10 or 20% discount. So you're seeing $50 worth of savings on your ComEd bill, and then you're only being charged $40 for that. So that's $10 worth of savings in that one example. The amount of money you're saving each month will vary based on a lot of factors, including the time of year and how much energy you use and how big your subscription is and things like that. But if you sign a contract that guarantees savings, you will save money every month. And you're also helping support new solar being built in Illinois. So it's a great program for people who can't install solar on their own roofs. If you can install solar on your own roof, you're going to save significantly more by owning it on your own roof. But this is a really good program for, people who live in apartments or people who have shaded roofs or people who have unique roofing materials that you can't put solar on top of or things like that. This is just to show you one of the resources that we have on our Solar in the Community website. This is that chart that I was talking about that compares the terms of all the offers. So I did not put this here so that we can actually go through it one by one, but just so that you can see that we have this handy chart that you can look at. And then we also have a blog post about each offer that goes into more detail about it. And we have this graphic on the website as well. So there's a lot of really good resources on that Solar in the Community website. And I will send that website link to Morgan to send out as well. The next program I want to talk about is Solar for All. This is Illinois' new low-income solar program. It includes incentives for community solar, residential solar, and solar for nonprofits. With Solar for all of the offers are required to be no money down, and it's going to be the greatest savings that you'll see on your electricity bill if you qualify for Solar for All. To qualify, you must be at or below 80% of area median income. For a family of 4 in the Chicago area, that's a total income of $63,200, but that varies by household size and by region. So if you think you might qualify, you can check on the Illinois Solar for All website, which is illinoissfa.com, to learn more. And in some cases, some of the offers for putting solar panels on your roof through this program are completely free. There's no upfront cost and there's no ongoing cost. So it's a really great program, but you do have to be income qualified in order to access it. That's pretty much all the info that I had. So I'm excited to see what questions people have. I know we're well within the hour and a half that was allotted for this. But if you want to learn more about CUB, you can visit our website, which is citizensutilityboard.org. We have lots of great resources there. And we also have this virtual utility bill clinic, and you can send your bills in to ubc@citizensutilityboard.org. Again, I'll send that to Morgan as well. And then this is my contact info, my email address, and my phone number, which rings through to my cell phone during work from home. So I know there's a poll up there right now, and then we can go to any more questions that people have.
Yeah, feel free to go ahead and fill out that chat. Since we are a smaller group, I can always unmute people as well if it's easier that way. Just put that in the chat and I'll definitely do that. Okay, so there's something here about publishing a list of recommended or rated installers, or just a recommendation kind of list. Do those exist already through state, or?
We refer people to the Illinois Solar Energy Association's list of installers, and we recommend that you always get 3 quotes, and then you can, get an idea of, if the first quote you got is really out of left field in terms of the price and it's really expensive, you're not going to know that until you get other quotes. And by getting other quotes, you can also do a better job negotiating the rates. And then you can also just get a feel for which installer you think, does the best job of answering your questions and things like that. I would also recommend getting quotes from different types of installers. So there's certain installers that are really big companies that are operating in states all across the country. And so you can get a quote from a company like that. And then you can also get a quote from a more local company. And I would just recommend doing that because I think the customer service experience might be a little bit different. With a local company, you're like dealing with the same person the whole time. And with a bigger company, there's a bigger customer service department, which comes with its own benefits, but then you don't have that same continuity. So there's pros and cons of each. And I would just recommend kind of getting quotes from different types of companies. Unfortunately, CUB, it's not really CUB's role to recommend installers. And like I said, there's just too many. Where our role is to do consumer education, make people be prepared to talk to installers and know what kinds of questions to ask. And our role is to advocate on behalf of consumers with utility-related issues directly from utility companies. So solar installers don't quite fall into that. We can do our best to answer your questions, but we're not going to be able to put together a list of recommended installers, unfortunately. Next question is, do we have a list of ambassadors? Yes, the Illinois Solar Energy Association has solar ambassadors. There's maybe like 20 ambassadors on their list. So these are people that have had solar for a long time and are happy to answer questions about the experience of actually going solar. It's not to the, they don't have so many that it's to the point where like every neighborhood has an ambassador, but you could still contact someone that's in, the same region of the suburbs as you or something like that. And that will also be on I can type their website in right now. Just pull it up.
And so everything that Christina sends to me, I will be sending to all of you. And as we mentioned at the beginning, we are recording this webinar. So it'll be posted, there we are, illinoissolar.org. Perfect. So we will be recording this and adding it to YouTube at a later date. So it sounds like there's a list of ambassadors through there, and then possibly through the state, they'll just have a list and you kind of have to get quotes, right?
Yeah, and same as anything else that you have done on your home, look at look at their ratings on Yelp, ask them for references, call the references, just kind of the general due diligence for any company that's going to be working on your home.
Yeah. And you can always call adult services too, our upstairs reference desk, if you needed some info. I'm sure they can find some info on, state lists if they exist, or just give you, the links to the state's solar site and all that.
Yeah, definitely. A large part of my job too is just answering solar questions. So you're always welcome to reach out to CUB as well. We can get you that info. We also got a question through the Q&A. Are panels recyclable and what happens after 25 years? So the panels are warranted to last for 25 years. And that just means that after that, if the production dips down a lot, or if if it breaks or something, it's not warranted, but it doesn't mean that they stop producing at 25 years. They're usually still producing at 80 or 85% of what they were producing in year one. So at year 25, you can usually just leave them up for longer and they're still going to help reduce your utility bills. But when you eventually do need to take them off, there are people working on recycling programs for them. There's not very robust recycling right now, unfortunately, in Illinois for solar panels. But in Illinois, we're like at the very, very beginning of solar being adopted. We're like at 1% solar on the grid. So my honest opinion is that by 25 years from now, there'll be much more robust recycling built up within the state and within the country to recycle those panels. But we unfortunately don't have that quite set up right now.
I actually have a question in regards to that. So we here in Illinois don't quite have the history, I guess one would say, for that. But are there surrounding states around us that do depend on or use more solar power than we do?
We're one of the best ones in the Midwest in terms of solar power. So immediately surrounding us, no, like Indiana, Kentucky, Iowa, and Wisconsin, like we're doing the best. Missouri, we're doing the best out of any state immediately bordering us, because we have a goal to 25% renewable energy by 2025, and we have strong net metering laws, which other states don't have. Minnesota has a lot of solar, but at this point, nothing in the Midwest compares to like California or Arizona or Hawaii. Yeah. But they'll get there eventually. It's just we're just not, in terms of the whole country, we're not like one of the early adopter states, but in terms of the Midwest, we are an early adopter state. Mm-hmm. And so I think by 25 years from now, not only will there be significantly more solar in Illinois, but there'll be so much solar in other states as well that I think nationally there'll be just more of a, there's things in the panels that are valuable. So even just from like an economic standpoint, it doesn't make sense to throw them away. So I think there'll be, more robust programs at that point. Yeah.
And super helpful too, to see that image with Germany, where they were kind of purple and, they just don't get as much direct sunlight, right? To see that compared to ours is kind of like, hey, maybe we can do this. So,
and then our net metering policy also reflects the fact that we have long winters, because rather than zeroing out your extra credits on January 1st and kind of leaving you with the next 3 months of low solar output and no credits, by setting that in April, it gives you a chance to build up extra in the summer and use them in the winter. So there's things that we can do that can kind of account for the fact that there's no getting around the winter, but there's things we can do to account for that to make it a lot more viable than it would be otherwise.
Very cool. Excellent. Great.
Well, I don't think I see any other questions, so I will send you all those resources in the morning. And
yeah, excellent. And then as soon as I have those, I'll send them out to all of you. And thank you so much for doing this, Christina. It's a pleasure to have you. And I, for one, have learned loads. And with these questions here too, we'll put them on YouTube, and I won't be the only one that has learned a lot about solar. Thanks again.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah, take care. Have a good one.